Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics and our active accomplices. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and today my guest is Kim Wright. Hi, Kim.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So before we get started, in the spirit of reconciliation, it's important to me to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land where I live, work, and record from is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, the Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. And Kim, hi Kim, again.
Hello.
You are the principal of Wright Strategies, and you are Kim Wright, so it is your business.
It's not just a snappy last name.
No, it's not. Although you definitely, like, some people are blessed, obviously, with great names that work in politics, like on a sign, like the right woman for the job, right? Kind of,
all of those things. Although my politics are not on the right side, I guess, quote unquote, of that. But yeah, it's very funny when I created the company name. I was like, might as well lean into it. But as you can imagine, in kindergarten, kids were not as kind about a last name like Wright, like Kim Wrong, which is funny because we'll talk about this on when we talk about commentating. But the amount of times I still to this day get somebody, oh, she's Kim Wrong, and I'm like, really? Is my kindergarten bully now taking shots at me on Twitter? But you just sort of
that is the same level of maturity that you would find internet trolls and kindergartners.
It really is like everything you learned about life you learned in kindergarten, including bad puns about your last name. But yeah, I certainly embrace it for the name of my company and the things I get to do.
Yeah. Well, so you founded Wright Strategies in 2018. You're also a very busy political commentator, and you've worked in public affairs across Canada at all three levels of government since 1990. And we recently met actually when you were in Calgary for Stampede. You came into the store and you were super interesting, and you weren't here for very long, but I wanted to know more and to chat with you again. So thank you for agreeing to do with this.
I am so excited to be here. As I said to you in the store, longtime fan. So happy to be here and to talk about politics and to hopefully help some of the listeners out there feel more comfortable about being women and allies and in politics and political life and all the various facets.
Love it. So let's get started. So, well, I noticed on your website actually that it says that you take a pan-partisan approach to politics, which is a love song to my own heart. I say that Madam Premier and Elected is multi-partisan. You say pan-partisan. So tell me about your political history, your political, and then also why pan-partisan is important to you.
Yeah, it is incredibly valuable. I spend most of my days in municipal government, which if you're coming into municipal government as a fierce partisan, check yourself, because there's so many very cool people doing very cool things about how do we build community, and that if you can get rid of those labels of all the stripes and find ways to create a very interesting tapestry of people and ideas, it is so much more rewarding. And I come at this, if one had known me back in my original politics days, like so many of us, we are fierce partisans. And then I realized that it's so much more rewarding to be a broader approach to this. And some of my dearest and nearest are of varying political stripes. And some of my favorite collaborators are not part of my quote unquote team, but you find ways to make it work. And so in particular, as I've built both a government relations practice, but in particular a municipal government relations practice, it has been, how do you find the best ideas, the coolest people, and find a way to build so much more. So that's really where I come at this, and bless the people who are fierce partisans still, and I can still rough and tumble with the best of them on issues. But really, with the heart of the work that I do, I don't care what stripe is in government. I care about how do we move forward.
same. And it's so refreshing to talk to someone who shares, because like that's my, my background as well. And there's like, yeah, I was intensely partisan when I worked as a staffer. And then and I love it and I do miss it. But now I think maybe we've both found, a sweet spot in that, the work that you can do outside of a partisan environment can be sometimes even more rewarding and more fulfilling. I feel like you're more of a connector in some ways because you can go beyond those political labels and you can get more done sometimes
Absolutely.
in this space than just by being, I belong to this party. These are the only people I work with. If you aren't in the same boat with me, then, you're in the ocean with the sharks.
Yeah. And it really doesn't have to be that, it doesn't always have to be that dramatic. And this is also why this notion of, well, we should have party systems in municipal government. I'm like, no, oh gosh, no. I actually like the collaboration. I find that, yes, there are some municipalities in Canada that have a party system. I don't think it works as well. I think that it just becomes too acrimonious and too divisive, and it doesn't need to be that way. I am also not a big fan of the proposals that are coming forward in Ontario around this strong mayor system with these veto powers. Ultimately, the beauty of municipal government is the collaborative approach. And I know that there are some listeners out there like, but it's weird and it's messy. Yep. So some of the best decisions are if you have people who are trying to figure out how to actually build housing, not just complain, oh my God, it's too hard to build housing. No, it's not. You just have to stand up to NIMBYs. So, finding those ways, finding those solutions. You do dozens and dozens and hundreds of things. Toronto City Council met for their last meeting of the term last week, and they dealt with 470 some odd items. Tell me that municipal government moves slow? Not a chance.
In one meeting or over
in one meeting? That was their council meeting. They dealt with that. That was the culmination of that particular cycle of council. There were of that month of council, and there were 470 ish items of varying size and complexity that they got through. So can you move fast? Absolutely. Is it messy? Yep. Is it complicated? Sure. But that's the beauty of what you get to do when you're dealing with municipalities.
Well, I mean, you say this, and then so being originally from BC, and I've, never actually been a resident of Vancouver. I've lived in the Valley and on the island in Victoria. But Vancouver, which is a city with parties municipally, and it is kind of a dumpster fire of, especially now because they're going into municipal elections in the fall. And the number of new parties, the number of people moving, the number of only of mayoral candidates, it's just it's overwhelming. And sometimes I'll check in and see, how things are going on when they have their meeting nights, and it is painfully slow. And so, yeah, I'm not in favor of party systems in politics either, but it's interesting to see how it works in Vancouver compared to even in Calgary. We don't have them as well. There are I would say, blocks.
Yeah, of course. And there are always going to be voting blocks, and those coalitions shift and change depending upon what's happening. And that's why I always say, get to know who these people are as people, because you'll be surprised. Sometimes the folks that you think should be part of a coalition of issue X are in fact not even close to it. And then people that you wouldn't have thought on that issue are super close to it. Again, creating interesting coalitions. It's more labor intensive, to be sure. It's a lot easier just to talk to the premier's office or the minister's office and get it done. But, you get better results this way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So is municipal your favorite level of government?
Absolutely. There's no question.
It would be. Yeah.
And I've certainly been a part of all the levels of government, but I just find, again, that collaboration, the speed in which you can move issues and items, the complexity of of whether it's a small town or a large city, the complexity of the items and issues that they're dealing with cannot and should not be overlooked. And their ability to, if you can see it, smell it, touch it, feel it, all of those things, usually a municipal government is in charge of it in some way. So really understanding what they can do, and they want to move fast, and they want to move public policy issues. Man, can they ever. I look to, when David Miller was the mayor of Toronto, some of the work they were doing on climate change, great. But also when they decided that they wanted to build a soccer stadium and built BMO Field, what is now BMO Field, they went from announcement that they were going to the under 18 men's soccer championships, and they didn't have a stadium for it. From that announcement to opening day was about 9 months.
Wow.
So when they want to move fast, boy, can they ever. And so, whether it's a hospital or a dental program or anything else they want to build, boy, can they move when they want to. So that's part of the fun that I get to do as a municipal lobbyist, is help them move fast. Or conversely, also when they're doing things that are maybe a little too fast, or maybe not quite as well thought out as I'd like them to be. Like when the city of Toronto wanted to ban coffee cups, and I was like, where are they gonna put them? Because at that point there wasn't robust travel mugs and all the rest of it. So helping them see maybe there's a different approach. Those are the kind of things. The natural curiosity that I get to come to about politics and political solutions is so much more entertaining at a municipal level.
Interesting. And I love it because, I explained when you were here in the store. So the Woman's Place is in politics design. Mm-hmm. Initially, I had Senate at the top just because I was like, orders of government, Senate, blah, blah, at the top. And then I realized, I was like, no, council should be at the top, because it's actually the most important level of government, because although you may not realize it in your daily life, it is the one that immediately, do you pull out of your garage in the morning and see your garbage cans? Municipal. Roads that you're driving on? Probably municipal. There's so many things that are
building
municipal.
Code for your garage.
Exactly.
Municipal.
Right?
All of those things. Your favorite restaurant you eat at is municipal. All of those things. And there's lots of, and how you get around in your city, on your transit, on your your taxis and your Ubers and all the rest of that. It's all
policing, fire.
All of it. There are lots of different ways to come at this. And I have to say, I get very frustrated when I hear people, municipal, it's the junior league. It's like, it's somehow lesser. It is so much more than that. And it's just a lazy take when people don't understand how city halls can work. Is, again, frustrating at times, sure, but that's because you got to do some extra legwork.
Mm-hmm. And so just out of curiosity, so you work in public affairs, you're a lobbyist. So how do you explain public affairs to someone who they're like, well, what is that? And how does it work?
So first of all, there's these notions out there that lobbyists have like envelopes of cash or some Scrooge McDuckian pile of money we just go swimming in. That is not true. In fact, most of your listeners, if you've ever been an advocate, if you've ever tried to move an issue or talk to your neighbors and your friends, it's a lot of what we do in the lobbying universe. It's what's going on. How can it be better? How can it be changed? How can it be, enhanced? And so what often happens will be that organizations or individuals will come to me and say, okay, this is what's happening, or I'm trying to, create a new industry, or I'm getting blocked by counselors because I'm trying to build this building, or, whatever the issue is. And okay, so let's look at this. How can we make this better? Is it a process problem? Is it a personalities problem? What is it that we're trying to accomplish? And really what we do at our best is try to find a way through those roadblocks, and sometimes it's almost like acting as a translator and speaking a different language. But it really is at its best trying to navigate through a process to make it a bit better.
I think that's a great way to explain it.
It's not always super high public policy. Sometimes it is, and sometimes it's just nuts and bolts of just trying to explain how to get different folks to talk to each other in a more meaningful way.
Well, I think that translation piece is really key because, say you're speaking, about one issue, but to two people who have understand it in different ways and see it being implemented in different ways. And then you bridge the gap between, the both of them and maybe you try to find the place where they, the common ground.
Yeah.
And that they are maybe on the same page. They just don't know it because the language that they're using is different.
Absolutely. And, daycare is probably one of the easiest examples to explain that different approaches get to the same place. There are some who will say, well, it's an economic issue. Absolutely, it's an economic issue. How do you get more women in the workforce? Make it so that they have childcare access in an affordable way. Others, it's more communal. It is how you build that village. Both of those things can be true. It's how do you bridge that and make it meaningful. So a lot of what we do is as lobbyists, and certainly what I do, it's storytelling. It's creating that narrative that makes sense to the person that you're dealing with, and how you get them to come along for the conversation, answer their questions, but really find a way to move the whole thing forward.
Yes, and do you know what? When that happens,
It's
it can be a
thing.
win-win-win. It can be. It can be, especially around things like childcare, which is, to your point, both a social and economic issue.
Absolutely.
So in addition to, explaining and translating complex issues to politicians and administration, you also do this on TV as a public affairs commentator. And so I'm curious, for someone who, maybe is political or works in politics or is maybe planning their post-political life, how do you get to do this? And what's your favorite part about it?
Oh, great questions all the way around. And I'll tell you that if you had asked me a few years back, if you had asked me 4 or 5 years ago before I started my company, was entrepreneurship my goal in life? No, no one in my family were entrepreneurs. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go start a company. That just wasn't my experience, my worldview. Have I in my pre-pundit life maybe yelled at a TV going, why is that person on and I'm so much better at it?
Oh, you have to come back to Calgary because I have a TV in the store, and when usually no one is here, but I turn it on and I yell.
Absolutely. And we all do. And somehow some friends of mine, that's how we've bonded over people that we've seen on television and what have you. So I was lucky. I ended up working for a company. My previous firm refuses to do those sorts of pundit panels. They're like, no, we just do the work. Great, fine. That is a perspective. Then I went to another firm. They're like, oh no, you're going to do this. I'm like, okay, then let's train and let's do it. The great thing about going on television or talk radio, there's a couple of parts to it. One, how do you make politics more accessible and more immediate to people's lives? And when I hear people say, oh, how you explain this makes this make more sense to me and makes me want to be more involved, that is the best compliment I can ever get. That should be the goal of anybody who comes on to any of those programs, how to make it more interesting and accessible and meaningful into their lives. So if I've done that job, it's quite good. The other part, and I'll say this in particular about talk radio. A few years ago, I've actually lost both of my parents, but my dad was one of those guys who he would argue with you, the sky is blue, and he'd be like, no, it's purple. What are you talking about? And finally, fine, it's purple. And you're like, what are you talking about? The sky's blue. So very much in that combative, make you better at arguing kind of way, which is a lot like being on talk radio, where it's always sort of combative and interesting. But how do you, again, go back to how do you make this meaningful to people? How do you get your point of view? I was lucky in that, and I'm grateful for it, that the firm that I had worked for put that out there, that I was a pundit available to talk about municipal issues and New Democrat issues and in politics in general. And then ended up doing a bunch of media hits and then just falling in absolute love with it. And now I do quite a bit of it, and love what I get to do, get to talk about a whole bunch of issues that run the range from, should we change some bail conditions, and how we look at, intimate partner violence, to less weighty issues. And, it's just a lot of fun. And I would say to people listening, just, I'm always happy to talk to people offline about it, putting yourself out there, but also regardless, don't read the comments, because it will hurt your soul if you read some of the comments that people respond to you. Some of them haven't changed since the taunts in kindergarten, and some of them are just vile, but don't read them, because it will make you not want to do it. And you need to do it because your voice needs to be heard.
Agreed. We need to see more women commentating on politics in Canada, like around the world. It's unbelievable to me that we still see commonly now known as man panels. There are so many qualified women who can talk about politics, and it's just absolutely unbelievable to me that in this day and age their panels should be forbidden.
Absolutely. And it is still shocking when people are like, oh, it's an all-female panel. It's like, yeah, you've been doing manels all day, so maybe, it's fine. I think the one that made me particularly angry wasn't a political one. It was a medical conference about women's health that was entirely men. And I was like, really? You couldn't find one person with a uterus to talk about this? There are lots of professionals. Now, it's like getting women involved in politics. Sometimes you have to ask a few times. So all of the women out there that are listening to this, I need you to all channel your inner Brad, Thad, Chad, whatever that, guy that doesn't seem to care that he's completely unqualified. You are overly qualified, I guarantee you, but you will never think of yourself that way. So please take a breath, take the chance, take the risk, and put yourself out there, because, you have a big voice out there. So please use it, and don't be afraid. And if you've got a channel, you don't want to channel your Brad, Thad, Chad that can do no wrong no matter what he does, then I will give the advice that is Queen Bee herself, Beyonce Knowles. Create a different persona if you have to do that to get yourself out there, because you need to. And that includes panels, conversations like this, and also, running for office and going for positions. Just because you don't check every single box off of a job description, that doesn't mean you cannot and should not apply for it.
Yeah.
Those job descriptions are, a vague idea, but go for it. Stop holding yourself back.
Especially because the Chads of the world who be like, oh, I meet, 3 of these 10 criteria, I'm applying, that's why, I have a card and it's a sticker in the store that says, do it with the confidence of a mediocre white man.
No offense to the Brads, Chads, and Thads out there who are lovely people, but you know what we're talking about here.
Well, but also I think it's, when say you do get asked to do something, as a woman in politics or commentating or whatever it may be, and you can't do it, you also, I would highly, request politely that you're like, no, I can't do it, but my friend, Sabrina, Claire, whoever it is, they can do it. Can I give you their contact information? Because
and I'll tell you, the producers and the showrunners who are looking for someone to speak about an issue will be grateful for that other opportunity to talk to somebody who might be outside of their sphere. So I do that quite frequently, and so cultivate those relationships with people. And even if it's just somebody who you happen to admire on social media, who can talk about these things, And if you can't do it, let them give the producer their contact information. It doesn't have to be anything more than, hey, have you talked to Nikki over here who does this cool thing?
Yeah. I think of political capital like a literal bank of political capital. And sure, you can take it with you when you die, but like, what does that do? And what does that mean? So, like, spend it, spend your political capital, help other people, help them, learn, grow, do different things. It doesn't come at a sacrifice. You're not going to get less of the cupcake. It just means there are going to be more cupcakes and more people eating them. And that's what equality and equity is like. Lift someone up.
And don't, we often, that person is up on some pedestal. No, they're not. Like, I walked into your store because, one, I think you do very cool things. And I just really love the vibe you're putting out into the world. And I was like, oh, I'm happened to be like right by it as I was on my way to get my hat fixed over at Smithfield. And I was like, oh my God, there's Madam Premier. Let me walk in. And then you and I started talking, and just happened to be a big fan of the things that you're doing, both in the store as well as in this podcast. Don't be afraid of saying that to people. Hey, I see what you're doing on Insta. It can be just as small as that, and it makes a big difference. So for people out there who are like, oh, I can't talk to X person because they're such and such, don't. And I'll throw this out there because people love, want to talk to people and talk about what they're doing and engage about stuff. I happened to be at an event once, and it was Rihanna and Kanye and Jay-Z we were at Caravana. And Ponder Replay had just come out. And so I went over to Rihanna before she was Rihanna. And I was like, hey, love this song that you're doing. It is my pump up jam every morning. Big fan of what you're doing. So keep at it. And she was so just appreciative. And so, just throw it out there to people.
Also, Ponder Replay is a great song.
It is a great song. I realize
this will age us because there will
absolutely,
right? Because other people will be like, what is this?
But for those who are
Umbrella.
listening, throw it onto your playlist. Just give it a shot. It's a fun song. So I
hope because she recently had a baby, and so can you imagine like an Umbrella or a Ponder Replay with energy, but talking about being like a semi-middle-aged woman? I'm like totally here for it.
Well, it can't be any more or less addictive than Baby Shark. So there you go.
Right? Yeah. I love chatting with you. It's too bad. I mean, it's great that you're in Toronto, but I wish you were in Calgary to do all the yelling at the TV and, to have more of these conversations more frequently. But so one last question, and that is, there's so much going on in Canadian politics right now. At times it can feel overwhelming. For me, maybe for you, I'm not sure.
Yep.
But how do you, when things feel politically overwhelming, how do you deal with them?
That's a great question. Sometimes you have to take the self-care of, for me, a couple of weeks ago was, I'm not going to do talk radio this week because it's just, there's too much happening in the world. That was a mental health break I took. But also, you don't have to solve every problem at once. So try to remember that. My favorite phrase out there is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. It's an important thing to remember in your day-to-day life, in your personal life, and especially with all of the chaos that keeps happening in politics, particular to women in various institutions. And we could do a whole show on Hockey Canada. We could do a whole show on the still amount of women who are taken advantage of in politics, and how these institutions have to change. Part of that is conversations. Some of it is those hard conversations, but try not to be overwhelmed by all of it at the same time, because you really do need to take that elephant one bite at a time. You also cultivate folks around you who you can talk to about these things in a meaningful way. Cultivating a group of people around you. There's that commentary of the 5 people you surround yourself with the most are the conversations you end up having. So keeping an eye on that. But I would be completely disingenuous if I said that there weren't days, there weren't hours and days and weeks where I was just like, the heck are we doing this all for? Because there's a lot of hate and there's a lot of fear out there. And there is a lot of things that are really uncomfortable conversations. And so support each other, love on each other, talk to each other, and find those folks around you who you can talk to about that. And it might not be your current inner circle. It might be those people that you meet on the internet, in terms of like different social media posts and podcasts. The other thing I try to do, and there are lots of days that it's just hard out there. And I'm a big believer in the concept of, move your body, change your energy. So however that shows up for you, because people have different abilities, I dance it out. Yes, that does make me a little, Grey's Anatomy at times, but I dance it out and throw on a song and go for a walk. Throw on music, have conversations, play a good game of cards, whatever it happens to be, whatever that works for you. But if you're feeling like you're getting stuck, throw on Ponder Replay or anything else, and just try to dance it out and change your energy a bit. And the other thing is, there are days that I feel like I'm like a self-help book, but there's this great concept of Mel Robbins, who I'm a big fan of. So if you're not following her on the socials, give her a follow. She wrote this book called The High Five Habit. And it is every time you sort of see yourself in a reflection, give yourself a high five, which sounds kind of goofy, except for when you think about like in sports, like all your teammates would have said, oh, you'll get them next time, or, hey, you've got this, you can do this throw. But we're so bad at doing it for ourselves. Oh, if I only lost these 5 pounds, if I only dressed in this way, if I only, how about start now and be excited about who you are? And it sounds a little, crunchy, but I'll tell you it works. And also, especially if you do a hard thing, high five yourself and don't, but this, or I should have done it here. I should have done it there. High five yourself. You got this, and you move on. And that's how you start to build up your own universe. But yeah, it's hard out there in politics, and we see it every day and across the political spectrum. And, I will say, whether you're a New Democrat, a liberal, a conservative, or a political orphan, we're all seeing it. We're all feeling it. We're all human about it. And so give yourself some grace to feel that. Yeah.
Oh, well, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is like the only person who maybe like, who's high-fiving himself the most and every day on a consistent basis is probably Pierre Poilievre. Like we could maybe, in a very specific way, but we, have the energy of Pierre, to do good things.
There is that, to do good things. And I'll say this because I always try to find good in people wherever I can. I will say that there is a culture of people who are trying to cultivate hate and fear and the disgruntled. It can bite you in the behind later on if you think you can manage that. We don't have to look very much farther than former President Trump and how he tried to manage those who felt unheard and unloved and cultivated that fear and hate. It is really hard to run a government on that. And so I think you need to be honest with each other, honest about the institutions that we serve. I'm not a fan of the campaigns that cultivate that are so incredibly disingenuous. So be careful what you wish for. And I'll also say this from somebody who has read everybody's housing policies, front to back, creating another level of bureaucracy and snitch lines. And the federal government is not how you get new housing built. It's actually standing up to people and saying, we need to have housing built. And in particular, we need to have housing that has services for those who have need mental health supports in their community. And you don't build that by fostering hate. So
Yes, 100%. And you know what? There are people, and I think Pierre is one of them, who, who talk a good game of burning it all down, quite like, some people in the States. But who gets things done? People who actually build things up. So, you know, surround yourself with those people, because you'll accomplish far more, and far more in a positive way. Because when you burn everything down, what are you left with? So
that's exactly it. I am still sort of shaking my head that what seems to be most the response to many policy initiatives on the Poilievre campaign is creating a new version of a snitch line. And I don't think that that's actually helpful. This notion of there are gatekeepers out there, they are, but that's not how you get at it. And you have to be honest about that. But maybe their calculus is being honest about what actually needs to happen in our institutions doesn't get you elected. I'd like to believe that at some point you have to be honest with the folks that are out there that are voting, that are citizens, that are residents, and how do you actually build that community that you're hoping for. I'd like to see that. Maybe that's a bit Pollyanna of me, but that's what I'd actually like to start seeing, is that authenticity about who people are and how they get there, and how do we build the Canada we actually want to see, not the one that is the cheap political points.
Agreed. We're definitely on the same page on that. And then also, what you say to internal people or party members is very different than what you say should be probably very different than that's a whole other podcast.
Well, but the thing
to the general electorate, but I think he's on the same path as Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole. He's in different ways, but his life in politics is going to be rather short-lived if and when, I hopefully believe, that when he's actually possibly in a position to have to govern, and all of these same people are going to be like, well, this isn't what you campaigned on, this isn't what you promised me, this isn't, all of these different things, and then there will be the same kind of revolt all over again.
And so there are lots of places across the country who are currently in leadership races, not only the federal Conservatives, UCP in Calgary, the Ontario NDP and the Ontario Liberals, the BC New Democrats. There are lots of conversations out there from leadership campaigns. And it always becomes the challenge, right? You can't look too far to the general without winning your own party first. And if you're so focused on winning the party, how do you win in general because of opposition research, et cetera? Start with being authentic. And I know that that's not always the easiest way to win, but if you understand why you want to do this, that is certainly helpful. I say to every leadership candidate, regardless of stripe, who comes and talks to me, and any candidate, frankly, tell me why you want to do this 2 years from now when you're dodging moose and Kapuskasing on the way to a Legion Hall. Because that's what the job is a lot of times. What's going to get you up? What's going to get you up when people are screaming at you? What's going to get you up and motivated? What is it you're trying to build and do? Because if you can't articulate that in your own heart, in those deep, dark moments, it's really going to be hard for you to maintain the longevity that is required as a leader.
Well, I think what will ensure your longevity in politics, specifically at a municipal level, is your very true passion for it. And I think for building things up, not burning them down, which we need more of, and we need more women doing in Canadian politics. So thank you so much for joining me today. I loved our conversation. If and when you're ever back in Calgary, please stop by. I'd love to spend time with you. And that can sound creepy, but
no, not at all. Not at all. Look, I'll say to listeners out there, cultivate what I have this group of women that I continue to cultivate, and cultivate sounds like a really creepy word, that I affectionately call the rad chicks who will, the long answer of that is rad chicks who I know will cut a bitch if they need to, not in a derogatory way, but like you know that these are just really rad people who have your back and are extraordinary. And some of them are people who I have admired for a long time. Some are who are folks I've admired for a short time, and continue to cultivate those relationships and those friendships and be a part of that building of that community. And I am happy to include you, Sarah, into that broader universe. So I'm very excited that we got a chance to meet and got a chance to talk, and hopefully the listeners today have enjoyed it.
Yeah, come back to Calgary anytime.
Absolutely.
And you don't need to wear your cowboy hat again. It's cowboy hat time is over.
It's true. Although I do, those who follow me on social media know that I do love a great hat and have a wonderful hat collection. So I'm happy that my Smith-built hat is part of that. But I'll definitely wear some other hats out in Calgary.
Yes. Okay. Well, I hope you have a great day. Hopefully see you on a TV soon, commentating back in Calgary or doing something else. So thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.